Do business, act business. Business matter. That's the business. Business matter. That's the business. Business matter. That's the business. Business matter.
Hello, you're welcome once again to the program Business Matter, a platform where we share business insights as well as trends that can help your business be more successful, as the case is. My name is Stephen Ipalibo Lawson.
That's the business. Business matter.
The African Continental Free Trade Area, which is AfCFTA, is a trade agreement amongst African Union member states, aiming to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of persons as well as investment. How much we are ready as a country to take an advantage of that, or how well positioned we are in terms of the progress report, are some of the things we are going to explore on this week's edition. Let us have our business update. My guest is a corporate and commercial lawyer at G. Elias, a leading business law firm in Nigeria. She's also an advocate for intra-African trade, where she's founded AfCFTA Dialogues, a platform dedicated to creating awareness and promoting the understanding of AfCFTA through meaningful discussions and knowledge sharing. She leads a diverse team of over 20 young persons from across Africa to create engaging content. She's also a member of the Independent Continental Youth Advisory Council on the AfCFTA. And she's also an alumna of reputable institutions such as the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, Academy, Trade Law Center South Africa, the Future Females Business School South Africa, and the International Trade Center SME Academy in Geneva. She's a member of the Global Shapers Community, an initiative of the World Economic Forum. She holds an exceptional academic background, having graduated first class honors in law from the University of Ibadan and the Nigerian Law School. She also holds an LLM degree from the University of Ibadan and currently secretary of the International Trade Law Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law. Join me as I make welcome Miss Eberechukwu Ezike. How are you, Ebere?
I'm fine, thank you so much.
It's good to have you on Business Matters. Part of what we do on Business Matter is actually to grab content like you shared for the benefit of our viewers as well as of the country, as the case might be. And the program is watched by both the presidency, watched by both the people in government as well as business interest. So some of those ideas are very important for them to actually hear about. And so my first question will be, the African Continental Free Trade Area or Agreement, whichever it is, perhaps you will help us throw more light to that. As promised that we're going to have a single market for goods and services, especially in Africa. How well have we done as a continent, and what is the progress status, as the case might be?
Okay, thank you so much for that question, Stephen. I think I would just start by differentiating between the AfCFTA, I would say AfCFTA agreement, and the AfCFTA. So the agreement is called the Agreement Establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area. That's the AfCFTA agreement. And the Free Trade Area is called the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, to progress, well, this agreement was signed in 2018. It came into force in 2019, and there's just been so much milestones achieved. So we could even start from the ratification process, and that's very important because when it comes to multilateral treaties or international agreements as this nature, it would take so much time to ratify. But we saw that within the space of a year, about 24 countries deposited their instruments of ratification and it came into force. So there's just so much support from African countries. Currently, we have about, I think, 47 countries that has ratified the agreement.
Fantastic.
There's just so much support. And then on the issue of trade, although trade has not officially started,
Okay.
but there is what we call the guided trade initiative.
Since 2018, trade has not actually started?
It has not officially started because
Okay.
there's just so much to put in place. The rules of origin has to be negotiated. There's just a lot of things you have to put in place before trade can actually start. Countries have to deposit their schedules of tariff, their schedules of commitment, that's for services, and their schedules of tariff for goods. But what the AfCFTA Secretariat did was to create an initiative called the Guided Trade Initiative. So it's like a controlled environment for countries to trade under the AfCFTA, just trade some selected goods. We had like Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, about 6 countries in different regions in Africa traded under the AfCFTA in 2022, and then there is also plans.
Was Nigeria part of those countries?
No, Nigeria was not part of it because Nigeria had not.
I know I heard stories of Ghana actually
Yeah.
taking an advantage. So some of us got the impression that the trade has actually come into force, and then why is Nigeria not leveraging it? We're bigger than Ghana, so how is Ghana benefiting and we are just standing alone?
Well, the countries that were selected were countries that had deposited their schedules of tariffs.
Okay.
So Nigeria has not done that, but Nigeria is making plans to do that. So there's the second round of guided trade initiative that will commence soon, and there's just so much preparation by the National Action Committee in Nigeria to just ensure that businesses in Nigeria take advantage of this second round of trade that would commence soon.
Okay, we know there are specific measures that need to be implemented to
Yes.
overcome some of this hurdle and to ensure a successful implementation of the agreement as it is. So what are some of those measures that needs to be put in place, you understand, for, this agreement to actually come in full force in order for us to benefit?
Okay, so I think we can start from awareness and educating
Okay,
people.
true, very true,
Because
very true.
I've been in a lot of conferences, and you just find people, when you ask questions, do you know about the AfCFTA trade conferences, and you're asking business owners, and they don't even know what it's about. They don't even know
Wonderful.
how to take part. So there needs to be a lot of awareness, a lot of capacity building, a lot of training, because businesses, they have to be export ready.
True.
Export
True.
readiness is very important
True.
to take advantage
True.
of the AfCFTA. So awareness in the sense
But
of
the export is within the African trade area. So
exactly.
the export does not obviously involve the European Union market, as the case might be. Because I think the African market, the African continental trade area, as the case is,
Yes.
is quite huge.
It is.
In terms of...
It's very ambitious.
Yes, it is ambitious. And I think in my research, I've made to understand that it happens to be somewhat the biggest
Yes.
in terms of, even bigger than Europe.
in participating countries.
In
yes.
participating countries,
Exactly.
Okay, so go ahead.
So I talked about export readiness as well, then also investment in infrastructures. Because when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about like road transportation,
True,
even
true.
digital infrastructure, even at the
Okay.
ports, trade facilitation. Trade facilitation has to do with the simplification and harmonization.
Process of that.
Yeah,
I'm
of
telling you,
processes of
it's
import and
it's a
export.
huge hurdle, and I think it's great. That's
Exactly.
part of the reasons why we said we should have some of this talk. And perhaps we might actually try to get the customs to come into the studio to come talk about how ready they are. Because
Yeah.
since 2018, 6 years down the line, if I'm not mistaken, and yet we've not officially taken off. Do you think by the year 2030 we'll be ready?
Well, it's a step-by-step thing.
Okay.
Because the AfCFTA is part of a bigger picture called Agenda 2063. That's an
Okay.
initiative of the AU for an integrated and prosperous Africa driven by its own citizens. And one of the objectives of the AfCFTA is to deepen economic integration. So this is
Okay.
like the first
Okay.
phase. We are still
Agenda
in the
2063. All right.
Exactly.
all
So
right.
we're still at the early stages. There's just so much groundwork and foundation being put in place. And it's important that we do that we do not rush because we want to just start.
Great.
In 10 years' time, we'll still be talking about the AfCFTA. In 20 years'
Okay.
time, we'll still be talking about the AfCFTA, but of course at different stages of implementation. But for now, I think progress has been made. All the protocols have been negotiated.
So amongst all of those member states. But when you look at some of the major challenges that is bedeviling us as a country, especially infrastructure, the road networks are not what it is. And I know that the government, the the past administration or the administration before that administration actually had started the Badagry Express. That Badagry Express road is supposed to be is supposed to connect Lagos or Nigeria, as the case might be, Ghana, Togo, all the way down to the West African coast, as the case might be. But we've not had that, as a matter of fact, finished. So, and Nigeria plays a critical role because they are leaders in Africa by population, by whatever metrics you want to use. And when you mention some of the issues in terms of infrastructure, do you see us getting it right in that regard? And if we don't get it right, are there not so many demerits that would disfavor Nigeria in this whole process?
Well, I think it's a matter of political will.
Okay.
A matter of commitment. As a country, we have to be very intentional. We have to own the vision of the AfCFTA. We have to decide that if we want this to work, then we'll put all measures that need to be put in place to make it work.
What would the benefits be for us?
A lot. We have access to other markets.
Okay.
Our businesses, our small businesses can leverage the AfCFTA to trade, to sell their goods across other countries in Africa.
Okay.
We can also export services.
Okay.
Because it's not just about trading in goods, trading in services. We can build competitiveness. We can take advantage of regional value chains. There's just a lot of benefit for us if we decide to really take this up.
But if we're looking at the economic frame of Africa, we know there are bigger economies and there are smaller economies.
Yeah.
How would that thrive? How would that work? Won't the smaller economies lose out in all of this? And how well positioned is a lot of these instruments to actually also protect the markets of smaller countries that perhaps may not have the economy of scale?
I think it's good you ask this question because even in the agreements, there are provisions for less developed countries.
Okay.
So for LDCs, that's the less developed countries, they have an extended period of time to eliminate tariffs. So let me go back to that tariffs. Now, what the AfCFTA agreement expects is that within a certain period of time, there will be progressive elimination of tariffs of duties on selected goods. So 97% is the benchmark we want to achieve. But for developing countries, you're expected to do that progressively within 5 years. But for less developed countries, they have an extended period of 10 years. And for sensitive goods, they have about 13 years to do that.
Okay.
Why developing countries, they have 10 years. So there is that provision for less developed countries. And also there's the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund. It's a fund to support smaller countries transiting into that free trade area to just help them and support them in whatever challenges, smaller countries, private entities as well.
What about the payment platform? Are we going to be trading in Naira? Are we going to be trading in CDs? Are there digital infrastructure that can facilitate cross-border transactions, as the case might be?
Yes, so one of the operational tools of the AfCFTA is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, that's the PAPS. So it's an initiative of Afreximbank, the African Export-Import Bank, together with the AfCFTA.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there, and then we're going to come back as soon as we return from this commercial break. Please stay tuned, Business Matters continues.
Let's talk business. Business matter.
All right, if you've just joined us, this is Business Matters, and I'm in the studio with Eberechukwu Ezike. She is a corporate and commercial lawyer with G. Elias, and she's the founder of AfTA Dialogues. And we're looking at the topic after beyond the rhetorics. And Ebere, before we went on that commercial break, we were looking at what digital infrastructure is present that can facilitate payment across border. Are we going to be dealing with Naira as the African currency, or are we going to be looking at something else, as the case might be?
Okay, so I was talking about the PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which was developed by Afreximbank. So what PAPS do is that it allows us to trade in our local currencies.
Okay.
So I can trade in Naira, and if I'm a buyer and the seller is in Ghana, the seller receives their money in cedis while I pay in Naira. So it is like a central payment gateway.
Okay.
Banks are being integrated, central banks, commercial banks, even fintech platform. So it's something that is being rolled out by the Afreximbank to just de-dollarize the economy and ensure that we can trade in our local currency.
Oh, this is a very huge vision, as a matter of fact.
It is.
With regards to fraud, I mean, we know there's instances of frauds that are ripe every single place, even with Continental trade dealings, as the case might be. Are there instruments put in place at the Secretariat of AfCFTA to be able to make sure that all of these are mitigated against? I mean, you don't want to lose your hard-earned money, as the case might be.
Okay, so this will bring me to the Digital Trade Protocol, which was recently adopted. So what the Digital Trade Protocol intends to achieve is to create a secured and safe ecosystem for digital trade. The issue of fraud that you're talking about, the deception, to build consumer trust, really, because I'm somewhere in Nigeria and I don't know this other person in Ghana. There has to be some sort of trust system being built. So in that protocol, state parties are expected to, cooperate in regulations, aligning their regulations with the protocol. Now, the protocol is still being negotiated. The protocol itself has been negotiated, but there are annexes on cross-border data transfer. There are annexes on digital identity, even on payment as well. That is still ongoing. The discussion is still ongoing. The negotiation is still ongoing. So this is like one of the instruments that the AfCFTA is trying to put in place to ensure that there's trust in the system. But at the same time, it would also depend on the state parties to also implement their own local system, their own local trust system. As a state party, you need to have some sort of consumer protection. In Nigeria, we have the FCCPC, that's the agency responsible for consumer protection in Nigeria. Other state parties are also expected to have same. So a lot of things would depend on state parties' cooperation. That's why I talked about political will.
When we look at the fact that borders are broken down, gateways are flung open, are we going to be looking at one African passport, or are we still going to maintain our own country passport in order for us to be able to access? Because we know in countries like, if I'm not mistaken, Kenya or Rwanda, so as an African, I can go to either of those countries, so to speak, without needing a visa. In some African countries, you need to be able to be stamped to actually get entry into the country. How will AfCFTA play in this regard when it has to do with access to other nations in terms of free passage of individuals, naturally?
General objective of the AfCFTA, AfCFTA, is to create a single market for the movement of goods and services facilitated by the movement of persons. Movement of persons is very crucial to trade. And remember, I talked about the AfCFTA being part of a larger picture, the Agenda 2063. So I'm going to take us back to the Abuja Treaty in 1991. So it was a treaty that was established to create the African Economic Community. Now, what that community intends to do is what you talked about, one single passport, one common currency, to just get Africa to be very integrated to, let me say the status of EU, for instance, become an economic union and like a monetary union. So there are different levels of integration. We are currently at the lowest phase of integration, which is the free trade area, and we still struggle with the issue of movement. I mean, was it not the richest man in Africa was talking about having to use 35 visas to travel around Africa?
You can imagine that.
So if the AfCFTA...
So if somebody at that level, where you know that, I mean, 35, my oh my, you and I would need a
lot.
Okay.
So the AfCFTA, for the AfCFTA to work, we have to open up our borders. Now, about the time the AfCFTA agreement was signed, there was the Free Movement of Persons Protocol that was also adopted. Unfortunately, the agreement is not in force. Only 4 countries ratified it. Which countries are those?
Ghana should be among them, I imagine.
I don't even think Ghana is.
Oh my God! Can you imagine that?
4 countries ratified.
No, but looking at the fact that Africa is a developing region, and we know that advanced economies like the United States, which is obviously a continent on its own, European Union, which obviously has become, an economic bloc. Do you see any threats with regards to the fact that the Western Hemisphere might see this as a major loss in terms of their trade revenue should the AfCFTA actually take full force, as the case is?
I think it's even an opportunity for collaboration, really. Because when we are together as a continent, we have if we get to the highest level of integration, we'll start negotiating as one. Just like the EU has its own status when it comes to multilateral treaties. So we have one voice, the African Union, negotiating agreements on behalf of its members, and it just makes it easier for us as a single community to collaborate with other countries. I know there have been talks about, geopolitical ties,
Yes.
and all these things that sort of hinder or might hinder the implementation of the AfCFTA. But I also think that it's also an opportunity for partnership and collaboration.
Okay. So the opportunities are quite huge in that regard. Collaboration, I think, is one word that a lot of us need to be able to expand.
Yeah.
Another has to do with trust. You've mentioned that earlier on.
Exactly.
But one of the things that rings a bell in my head has to do with data. And I know at the conference, you actually sat on the panel that looked at bridging the data trust, as the case might be.
Yes.
And data is wealth, as it is, depending on how you look at it. And so you mentioned it in passing, though. However, I would like us to expand it further. Where the issue of data comes in this regard, where Africa, if you remember, there were issues that was like a lot of the data that we seems to generate actually not domiciled in our data centers. And so the issue of trust, the issue of data security, the issue of and digital identity, which you actually mentioned, actually came to fore. And so if we are to make any progress, knowing the fact that the new age we're in right now is a digital age driven by AI, machine learning, and the rest of that. So it tells you that data is the fundamental denominator in all of this. How do we protect that asset and to ensure that that asset real flows within the African continent?
Okay, so we'll go back to the digital trade protocol that I talked about, the AfCFTA digital trade protocol. Now, one of the provisions is on cross-border data transfer.
Okay.
And the protocol mandates state parties to ensure that there are no restrictions to cross-border data flow as long as it has to do with digital trade. And I
Okay.
talked about,
Okay, so squarely with digital trade has
digital
nothing to do,
trade.
because security issues has to also come in. I mean, we are still
Exactly.
sovereign nations.
Yes.
Well, all of the member states and of those who have actually signed up to the agreement are still sovereign nations in their own right. And so somebody can choose to want to go to war with you and then has your data and all that.
Yes,
So.
yeah, it has to be related to digital trade. So
Okay.
obviously measures like minimization, data minimization, would need to be applied because, of course, when you're talking about digital trade, you don't need to know my date of birth. Exactly.
Okay, yes.
There are some questions you
Yes,
will not
you
want
don't
to
want
ask.
to
You
ask.
just need just
Okay.
relevant information that can facilitate that purpose of trade. So the protocol also talks about data protection laws, and I think it just all boils down to state parties strengthening their data protection laws.
Now, because of time, I want to ask you two quick questions. One has to do with the SMEs. How ready are they, and what initiative can be put in place to boost their participation and competitiveness? I mean, it's important because the SMEs are obviously one of the moving engines of any economy.
Yeah, I like talking about MSMEs a lot. You talked about moving engine; they are the backbone of every economy, really. And for measures, I think capacity building initiatives will be very important.
And you mentioned awareness as well.
Awareness.
And that awareness is very key, and I think that is what we are trying to do on Business Matters. And
Very
we are
good.
thanking you for being here, because a lot of people think they know. For example, the Agenda 2063. You'll be amazed that more than, we didn't even know that the AfCFTA is just part of a bigger vision, as the case might be. So for the SMEs, you had mentioned capacity. We've looked at awareness, and what else again should be the initiative?
Trade finance solutions.
Yes,
finance.
it is
Very
important. Very
Money
important.
Is important to facilitate trade.
It is important.
And I know Afrexim Bank has been doing a lot on this. They're trying to implement simpler ways of financing for MSMEs, different from the traditional means of financing that would require collateral.
Yeah,
and other
commercial
things.
banks are always,
Exactly. So things like bank guarantees, like factoring, that will allow you to just use your receivables as some sort of collateral, is what they're trying to implement.
Okay, that's ingenious. That's ingenious. But how? So obviously with AGOA, there were certain things that was observed that the standards of the exported products, as the case might be, didn't actually measure up. How are we going to avoid that, especially for AfCFTA?
So for that, harmonization of standards.
Harmonization of standards
We have
across the whole area, so to speak.
Yeah, so we have the African Standard Organization, ASO, and it's one of the things that is being, talked about and they're trying to implement. Harmonization of standards. I know at the REX level, so the REX, the Regional Economic Communities, we have about 8 recs that, makes up Africa. The ECOWAS, the SADC, the COMESA, the Arab people as well. So at the recs level, the level of integration when it comes to standards is a bit higher than the continental level. So what the AfCFTA is trying to do is to, build on the recs and just bring everything together as one. So we have that uniform body for standards, and the solution is to harmonize. We need to harmonize. We need to harmonize our standards. Okay. Because why would I export my goods under the AfCFTA and it's being brought back because it's not meeting up to standards. Now imagine having to comply with different standards in different countries.
That would
for
be
a small business.
Yeah, they can't be able to stand. Anyway, on that note, we will have to harmonize the conclusion of this interview. I want to say a big thank you for being our guest on Business Matters. We hope to extend another invitation to you, to be honest. I think this topic needs to be expanded beyond what we've done today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, there's so much we can bring to you on the interview segment. Please stay tuned. Business Matters continues after this brief.
Business Matters. Let's talk business. Business Matters.
You've heard it. We have a huge opportunity that is going to be brought about as a result of the AfCFTA. Nigerians need to be well positioned, especially our SMEs, in order for us to take an advantage of what this is bringing to us. And it's a long-term vision, but there's no better way to kick off than putting up the right foundation so that whatever we build on it will stand. There's so much we can bring to you on this week's edition of the program. Please, if you want us to bring any topic or any guest, kindly reach our producers. You'll find the numbers on our screen. And of course, follow us on our social media handles, while we'll keep in touch to build a much more successful business. My name remains Stephen Ipalibo Lawson. Bye-bye for now.